Yep, I hear the voice saying recording in progress, so we're good.
I'm Dr. Dave Chandler. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with me someone who is a very dear friend and someone who is a very dear friend of anyone who values freedom, liberty, and the rule of law. Mike Cutler is our country's number one expert on immigration, both legal and illegal. And how can I comfortably say that? Well, all you have to do is know Mike Cutler's background. Mike brings us 30 years of experience with the former Immigration and Naturalization Service. His titles and his positions that he held are incredible. He was an immigration inspector assigned to Kennedy International Airport in New York. He was an examiner to the unit which was responsible for adjudicating petitions filed by United States citizens and lawfully admitted permanent resident aliens on behalf of their alien spouses. Mike was a criminal investigator, a special agent for INS in New York City. He was also the INS representative to the Unified Intelligence Division of the DEA in New York. Mike was a senior special agent assigned to the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force. Bottom line, folks, Mike's career was incredibly unusual in that it provided him with a, let's call it a grand tour that gave him extensive insight into the many aspects of immigration and also provided him with an intimate view on how immigration not only impacted other law enforcement agencies within the United States, but how it affects every American, every community, every town, every suburb, every city. His content is available at Michael Cutler, C-U-T-L-E-R, michaelcutler.net. It is my privilege, pleasure, and honor to welcome back Mike Cutler. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Always great to join you.
Well, it's always a privilege and a pleasure. So, Mike, we're 150 days now into the Trump 2.0 administration. Give us your take on the immigration front and what the Trump administration is pursuing, and there's some concerns, Mike,
Yeah.
and you and I've discussed this briefly, but right now, one of the headlines we're seeing is that President Trump is going to give a pass, if you will, to enforcement on illegal immigration issues as it relates to people involved in the agricultural community, in hotels with employment, and in restaurants. Now, Mike, I'm not sure where he came up with this. Obviously, somebody's giving him pressure. Educate us because you always give us the inside baseball line on what's really going on here. To me, I have a problem with that. And am I off?
No, I have a very, very, very big problem. I know a lot of conservatives were big fans of Ronald Reagan, and there were things Reagan did that I certainly agreed with. I certainly agreed with the warning that he gave that freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. He was certainly right. But on immigration and his relationship with federal employees, for me, not so much. It was the Reagan amnesty that provided over 4 million illegal aliens with lawful status. By the way, we were initially told that this amnesty of 1986, the Immigration Reform and Control Act, would involve about 1 million to 1.5 million. We wound up with nearly 4 million. And no one even talks about the fact that once you legalize those 4 million, they then immediately had an absolute right to petition to bring in all of their minor children and all of their spouses. So I'm not even sure what the ultimate number was. Probably 20,000, 20 million rather. God only knows. And I'll tell you, not only was I an agent, and I appreciate your detailing of the thumbnail sketch of my resume, if you will, but I did tons of TV after 9/11. All of the networks were accurate. I was at CNN. I was a frequent flyer at CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, believe it or not, ABC News, right on target, because everyone was still quaking in their boots over the fact that we had suffered the worst terror attack in the history of our country. So they understood that we needed to do what we needed to do. And, I was called before something like 17 congressional hearings in the House and Senate. I was contacted by the 9/11 Commission, provided them with sworn testimony. And I did a ton of TV and a ton of state legislative hearings around the country trying to get our political leaders to understand the nexus between immigration and national security. The 9/11 Commission made it crystal clear. Border security is a vital tool in the counterterrorism arsenal, to use the language that was in the 9/11 Commission staff report on terrorist travel. The 9/11 Commission staff was so determined to focus on immigration that they went beyond what was in the 9/11 Commission report, and they issued a monograph that focused on the ability of terrorists to travel around the United States, enter our country, and embed themselves, hide in plain sight. So they were very clear on all these issues. And so to go from where we were then to where we are now blows my mind. But understand that Reagan gave us this amnesty in 1986. He also gave us the diversity visa. He gave us the visa waiver program.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, when you talk about immigration, oh, well, the conservatives want tight borders. No, the conservatives wanted no borders. No borders.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie Sanders, just a few short years ago, said open borders is a Koch brother fantasy. Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bernie Sanders went all in, opened the borders. Harry Reid, the late Senator Harry Reid, stood on the floor of the Senate as a new senator and said, you have to be crazy to give anything to an alien who's illegally present in the United States. They have no right to be here. They need to leave. What happened to Harry Reid? Sheila Jackson Lee called me for 2 hearings. For those of you who have a long memory, 6 months to the day after the terror attacks of 9/11, it was discovered that 2 of the dead terrorists, Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shehi, these 2 thugs were in the cockpits of the 2 airplanes that struck the 2 towers of the World Trade Center complex. Atta was the ringleader. So immigration gave them authorization to attend flight school. 6 months to the day after 9/11. The world knew they were dead. The world knew they were terrorists. But that didn't stop the old INS from screwing up royally, because they had given a contract to a computer company in Texas that was sending out letters of approval. Instead of having the employees of government simply, send a notice out, go to the mailroom at the end of your shift, which is what I did as an adjudicator. You mentioned I was an adjudicator.
Mm-hmm.
So if we approved the petition, I would take an envelope. It was paint by numbers. You would check off the box. Your application has been approved. Your application has been denied. Further information is needed. Whatever. There were several categories. You'd go down to the mailroom on my way out of the building at the end of my workday and drop it off, and it would be mailed off to whoever needed to get the notification. Suddenly, we find ways of giving multi-gazillion-dollar contracts to companies. You have to wonder if these companies were making campaign contributions. You're seeing it with the NGOs now. I mean, if the president wants to really get rid of waste, fraud, and corruption, stop major campaign contributions, because they're paying for the waste, fraud, and corruption. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they make campaign contributions. So it's like the music, the music goes round and round, the money goes round and round, and we're being soaked. So Ronald Reagan gave us this incredible amnesty. It was a disaster. And there was so much fraud. This was back 40 years ago when desktop publishing started to become a thing for Americans. You could buy a computer and you could get a printer, and suddenly document fraud vendors were establishing a cottage industry in the United States, providing documentations for aliens. And the way the amnesty went, if you could show you entered the United States prior to whatever the date was, frankly, I don't remember it after all those years, but there was a cutoff date. And if you got here before that date, you were good. Well, how do you verify when an illegal alien ran the border? There's no record of entry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So an alien could come in a week from Thursday and say, I've been living here for the last 15 years. Unless you had agents who could go out and knock on doors and show photographs, and it's a labor-intensive investigation. There's no magic button you could push. The guy snuck into the country. When did he sneak in? Who knows? Who cares? So they were paying for documents so they could go to immigration and say, I met the requirement. Think about that. I was going into one of the TV networks, perhaps CNN, maybe it was MSNBC. I don't know. This was a daily occurrence. I was doing 20 TV interviews in an average month, sometimes even
Wow.
more, plus radio.
Mhm.
Everybody was concerned. Everybody got the message. They got the memo. And I remember sitting in the back of a car. My driver was from Lebanon, as I recall, heavy Middle Eastern accent. I didn't tell him what kind of work I did or why I was going into the studio. He just knew that he was picking up a guest who was going to be on the air. Then he said to me, what are you going to be talking about? I said, oh, government. And he started laughing. He goes, oh, those idiots in the government? I said, idiots? He says, yes. And you know who the biggest jackass was? Well, I was enthralled. I said,
Yeah.
who? He said, Ronald Reagan, biggest fool on the hill. I said, that's a terrible thing to say about a former president. No, the guy was an idiot, and the people at immigration were dumber than he was. Because back then, all we had to say is, we worked on a farm, and they gave us a green card, and then we brought all of our family in. I said, well, what kind of farm work did you do? Farm work? I've never been to a farm. Who needed to go to a farm? You just paid a farmer who gave you pay stubs that showed you worked for him and you were in. He said, my whole village moved from Lebanon to the United States. And in the weekends, we have barbecues and we toast Ronald Reagan, the fool who gave us all green cards because we lied and they were too stupid to figure it out.
And we're
I want you
repeating.
to put
Hey,
yourself
well,
in my
Mike.
place sitting in the back of that car.
So, Mike, we're repeating history yet again. In a,
Yes, we are. Yes, but by the way,
wait,
just to
who, Mike?
really underscore this,
Mike,
the
who?
9/11 Commission staff report on terrorist travel has real nuggets in there. I wish that Stephen Miller would go back and look at the articles that I sent him way back when he was working for Jeff Sessions. I'm going to read a quote to you.
Yeah.
These aren't Mike Cutler's words. This is right out of the 9/11 Commission staff report on terrorist travel. Okay?
Uh-huh.
This was written to prevent us from making the same dumbass mistakes again.
Mhm, mhm.
Once terrorists had entered the United States, their next challenge was to find a way to remain here. Their primary method was immigration fraud. For example, Yusuf and Ajaj concocted bogus political asylum stories when they arrived in the United States. Mahmoud Abu Halima, involved in both the World Trade Center and landmark plots, received temporary residence under the Seasonal Agriculture Worker Program, or SAW. Actually, we knew it as the Special Agriculture Worker Program. They identified it slightly differently, but it's the same program they're talking about. The SAW program, after falsely claiming that he had picked beans in Florida. Mohammed Salome, who rented the truck used in the bombing, overstayed his tourist visa. He then applied for permanent residency under the Agriculture Worker Program, but was rejected. Ayad Ishmael, who drove the van containing the bomb, took English language classes at Wichita State University in Kansas on a student visa, and after he dropped out, he remained in the United States out of status. Now, understand, we're giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens.
Right, right.
They stopped doing it after we realized that you had illegal aliens renting trucks and carrying out attacks. The so-called blue states are tripping over themselves, not only providing driver's licenses, but blocking immigration agents from having access to the databases. This is madness. One of the people I arrested as an agent was a fugitive from Israel. The guy was probably suffering roid rage. He was on steroids like you wouldn't believe. When we arrested him, the guy had a 27-inch neck.
Whoa.
He did not look normal. He looked like a cartoon character. We needed 3 sets of cuffs. He had killed a Palestinian woman. The Israeli police, who I worked very closely with, reached out to me. They said, this man needs to go back to Israel to stand trial for murder. We eventually found him, and the Israelis were tremendous to work with. Not some countries don't want to take back their criminals.
Oh, right,
The
right.
Israelis not only took them back, provided us with free transportation, so it cost the U.S. government nothing. We sent him home. He was eventually put on trial, found guilty, and he was convicted of murder, which helped the family that lost the woman in that family, gave them some measure of closure that the guy that did this to their family member is in jail.
Mhm.
This is what justice looks like, okay? Understand that. The Israelis were super helpful. I worked with the Brits, I worked with the Canadians, I got an award from the government of Japan. But the Israeli government, flat out, without any equivocation, was the most helpful, most eager to assist us with whatever we needed, to the point where they actually flew Israeli police detectives to the United States to monitor wiretaps on an Israeli drug gang because normal Hebrew wouldn't work. You needed people who understood the slang used by the drug gangs. So we had a whole team of Israeli detectives assigned to New York for roughly a year sitting on the wiretaps for us. Think about that. So we know from prior experience that the way I found this guy, by the way, was where he registered his car. He had 5 different addresses, but eventually going through motor vehicles, I found the guy who was a fugitive wanted for murder. We sent him home. Justice was served. Now, the governor of New York, it started with Cuomo, now it's Hochul. We're not going to let you know what's in those computers. So if you stop somebody, you pull a car over, one of the most dangerous things you can do in law enforcement, there might be weapons in the car. He may have stolen the car. Maybe he's wanted for a triple homicide. You're throwing a hook into a very deep ocean. You know you caught a critter, but you don't know what critter you just caught.
Right.
And they're saying to ICE agents, screw you. If you get shot, good for you.
Yeah.
And you have Democrats referring to lawful arrest by immigration agents as abductions,
Right.
as kidnappings,
Right.
as disappearing. I mean, seriously? Now, this is something I don't get. You would think the relationship between legislators and law enforcement officers should be seamless. If you're a law enforcement officer, you're enforcing the laws that they legislated. They gave us the tools, and we use the tools to protect the public. What could be a simpler concept? So you have legislators frantically running around, stop ICE, defund ICE, how dare you arrest bad guys? So, and then you have the news media, oh, immigration arrested all these people, they have no criminal histories, why are they arresting these people? Well, if you worry about sleeper agents, and I've arrested terrorists, which is why the 9/11 Commission reached out to me. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a wrong number. Okay. They sent me a very nice email saying, Agent Cutler, we need you to come to Washington. Of course, I immediately did. A sleeper agent is an alien who, by whatever means possible, enters the United States. They can stow away on a ship. They can come in with a counterfeit passport. They could run the Canadian border. They could run the Mexican border. They could skydive. The point is, they get here by hook or by crook, literally. Then they keep a low profile. What does that mean? They don't spit on the sidewalk. They don't jaywalk. They don't argue with their neighbor. They smile at everybody. I guarantee you the hijackers on 9/11 smiled at the people they were about to slaughter on the airplanes when they got on board the plane. It's part of the facade. Somebody once said that an effective spy is somebody who would not attract the attention of a waiter or waitress in a greasy spoon diner. You could say the same thing of a terrorist. And by the way, it might well be that that waiter or waitress is the spy or is the terrorist. Think about that. When you see people driving cars, a livery van, a taxi cab, an airport van, this is a perfect kind of a job for terrorists. Why? It gives them opportunities to drive around the city in a vehicle that attracts zero attention. A yellow cab in New York is like a tree in a forest.
Right.
It's a duck blind for a hunter. If a guy gets in the back of the car, do you know if the guy is going to his dentist, visiting his daughter, or maybe having a clandestine meeting with the driver, and all they have to do is exchange memory sticks without saying a word to each other? I've done tons of surveillance, and when a guy gets in the back of a car for hire, you have no way of knowing what's going on in that car. Again, it could be a guy going to the dentist, or it could be two terrorists exchanging information, exchanging diagrams, photographs, instructions, okay? So we're giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens. Think of how many barriers have been erected, not only in the United States, but around the world. Barriers against what? Car bombs and truck bombs. Car bombs and truck bombs, right? But we have no clue who's driving the vehicles. And when you get a driver's license, as the 9/11 Commission noted, you can go out and rent a truck. We had a killing in Lower Manhattan a few years ago by an ISIS adherent. The guy came here from the Middle East. He rented a truck, and mowed down 8 tourists from Argentina who were riding bikes on the West Side Highway, 3 or 4 blocks from what became to be known as Ground Zero. Time and again, you've seen where the cars are being used to transport a bomb, run people down. How many attacks have we seen in the United States of people being mowed down by motor vehicles, trucks, cars, buses, vans, etc.? We've seen it around the world.
Hmm.
And we're giving people who are undocumented, which means we have no clue who they are,
Right.
driver's licenses. And once you get a driver's license in, let's say, New York, because we don't care, we want everybody to drive. Uh, I really think that the New York politicians and others like them, maybe they're getting campaign contributions from funeral homes because they're certainly generating enough business for the funeral homes,
Yeah, they
aren't
are. That's for sure.
Think about that.
Yeah.
So you take that New York driver's license and you could go to Nebraska.
Right.
You can go to Wyoming. You can go to Hawaii. You can go to Puerto Rico. You can go to Alaska. You can rent a truck and kill a lot of people.
Hmm.
So we should have learned the lesson, and I did a little bit of a study. We hear all this business, guns, 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 got to control the guns, got to control the guns. Do you know that every year nearly as many people die because of motor vehicle accidents as die because of firearm situations?
Right.
In both cases, it's over 40,000 per year.
Hmm.
Think about that. Now, when someone is involved with a car crash, a guy smashes into a school bus, kills 3 children, and the school teacher loses her leg. It's all over the news. The guy was drunk. The guy was stoned. How come we never hear about drugs that may be used by people who carry out shootings? I doubt strongly you're going to hear anything about the shooter who just killed those 2 firemen and wounded a third in terms of whether he was on drugs. Why
Right.
don't we get toxicology reports from his mass shootings?
That's right.
How's that for an interesting question?
No, it's very true.
So what my job is to make people think, to ask questions, the art of the question. It's been said that Jews answer a question with another question. I'm Jewish, so perhaps I'm genetically predisposed to ask questions. But remember, it was Voltaire who said you judge a person by you judge the intelligence of a person by the questions they ask. Why is nobody asking the question, how many times do we have mass shootings where the shooter is operating that weapon under the influence of a dangerous drug? We
Right.
know that marijuana is so potent these days that it causes psychotic behavior in teenage boys.
Mhm.
They're legalizing pot everywhere. And when Colorado was the first state to do it, motor vehicle accidents went through the roof.
That's right.
People being injured, people being killed. But what was more important was we can tax the pot. Who cares about the dead bodies? And again, maybe, just maybe, they're making the funeral home owners happy. I've never seen this kind of self-destructive, suicidal behavior by people who are elected to allegedly represent us and vilifying law enforcement officers who go in harm's way to take people off the street who kill, who maim, who rape little children, rape women. No, 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 we can't have that. Let them out there. Let them be free. They're expressing themselves. Maybe rape is a new form of the First Amendment. I mean, the lunacy that we're being subjected to. And neither party gets a pass from Mike Cutler.
Oh, that's right.
I'm absolutely sick of this nonsense.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Trump means well, or someone, is leaning on him. But goodness gracious, Mr. President, if you watch this tape, I hope somehow you do. Look at Mahmoud Abu Alima. He was involved with the bombing of the World Trade Center in '93 that killed 6 people, injured over 1,000 people, damn near brought the damn tower down sideways, which would have killed hundreds of thousands, and would have ruptured the seawall and would have flooded Lower Manhattan. Canal Street would have had a real different meaning in Lower Manhattan. And what have we learned from that? Well, one of the perpetrators claimed to have worked on a farm. The closest that piece of garbage ever got to a farm was when he drove his taxi cab. Oh, there we go again. Taxi cab past Central Park in Manhattan. He never worked on a farm. And let me tell you, we did investigations into farms. And Donald Trump said, well, no farmer's going to vouch for a guy that's worked for him for 20 years if he's a murderer. Does he know?
Yeah,
We
right.
went into a glass factory one day. True story, and I think it's a worthwhile story. I had a brand new agent who just got out of the academy riding with me. PJ went on to become a member of management, DEA. Real good guy, real big, powerful guy, played college football, as I recall. And we were with another team, and this was before the law was changed that established the crime of knowingly hiring illegal aliens. So if you arrested the illegals, we couldn't bring charges against the employer unless they somehow brought them in, provided them with documents, or harbored them and so forth. Mostly it was an administrative thing. By the way, there's also criminal laws concerning immigration. You know, the lies. Oh, being here illegally is like jaywalking. No, it's not. I worked with Senator Al D'Amato unofficially, not as an agent, but as a tax-paying constituent, to change the reentry law. It used to be no more than a 2-year felony. Today, if you're a criminal alien, you get deported, you come back, you're looking at up to 20 years in jail. 20 years in jail is not jaywalking.
No.
If you commit visa fraud in conjunction with terrorism, the penalty is 25 years in jail. Not exactly like jaywalking. Illegal alien with a firearm. Well, the left hates the gun so much. Why aren't they pursuing those charges? Illegal alien with a firearm or illegal alien in possession of ammunition, 10 years in jail. Not exactly jaywalking, and there's other similar criminal charges. Okay, so you have administrative charges that seeks the removal of the alien who's here illegally, and you have the criminal charges, like any other crime, involves the imposition of a fine, a jail sentence, and so forth. Okay, so we went into this factory. There was a strike, and I said to the other guys, hey, if there's a strike, maybe he's hired people to replace the strikers who were picketing the plant. It was a glass factory. We went in, the owner gave us permission to look around, and I find a guy, very muscular guy, short, maybe 5'9", but really powerful. He looked like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe 40-ish. And when I questioned him, he claimed that he got citizenship through his uncle. Well, that doesn't make sense. But
Right.
then I thought about it. They said, well, maybe his uncle did it for one of his parents, and then the parent gave him citizenship. That's doable. So, people don't understand the law, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt. So I went out to the car, got on the two-way radio. We didn't have cell phones back there. Called the office. I said, this guy claims to be a naturalized citizen. If he's naturalized, we have to have a record of him in the system, okay? If you have a driver's license, there's a record of you in the database for DMV that they don't want to share anymore, right?
Right.
I couldn't find any record. I said, that's odd.
Yeah.
So I told the owner we were taking this guy with us, and he said, you can't do that. He's my most valuable employee. He's worked for me for 5 years. He has the keys to the factory. When I'm late, he opens for me. If I have to leave early, he closes. He has the combination to my safe. He has slept in my house. My family lives with me. He's had dinner at the dinner table with my family. I said, look, calm down. There's probably a mistake. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring him down to the office to try to figure out what's going on. And this guy was adamant. This isn't fair. You shouldn't be doing this. He's the most honest human being I've ever met, short of my wife. I said, what are you guys in love?
Right.
And I go to put cuffs on the guy. And as we're walking out the door, he was working the water fountain with his hands cuffed behind him. And I said, this guy's dangerous. How many people could use the water fountain?
Yeah, right. In cuffs.
In cuffs.
Yeah,
So I said, you know what?
Done that. He's been there, done that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm going to loop his belt through his handcuffs so he can't slide them under his butt in the back of the car, because now he's got a weapon that he could use to choke us.
Right.
So we're heading into the office. We're going to make the one arrest just to show this new agent how things are done. This was going to be a how-to for him. And halfway into the office, the other car calls me on the tactical frequency. They said, have we got a story for you? I said, how good is it? I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good is the story? They said, 20, 25.
Ah!
I said, no. They go, yeah. What is it? Nope. We got to get you out of the car because we have to see the look on your face. I said, okay, let's go. We pull into the garage. The guy is sitting in the back of the car with this goofy grin on his face. And my buddies come up to me. And I warned this new agent, just because someone's working in a factory doesn't mean that that's all there is to the guy. He could be a fugitive. He could be a murderer. And he said, yeah, right. I said, I've been here a long time, long enough to know, don't scoff.
Right.
Well, so here is the story, boys and girls. You're going to love it. You can't make this up. This guy was convicted of a homicide. He pleaded guilty, which meant that he probably committed a murder. We didn't have all the paperwork on him, but we did know he did years in jail for his involvement in a homicide. He was deported from the United States. He came back to the United States, used a fake name, was arrested by immigration. He was prosecuted for unlawful reentry by a criminal alien.
Right.
He was serving a jail sentence in a federal penitentiary when he escaped. Oh, bingo. We called the marshals. They came running down. He was looking at something like 10 years from now added to all the other stuff
Yeah.
of escaping from the federal penitentiary and using false identity documents. So this guy hit the trifecta. Now, I'm telling you the story because, yes, it's an unusual case, but it's not as rare as you might
Right.
imagine.
Right.
I go back to the story that when you drop a hook in the ocean, you know you caught a critter, you just don't know what critter you caught.
Right.
So when we hear this business, oh, this guy didn't have a criminal history that we know of. Add that to the sentence that we know of.
Right.
We have arrested sleeper agents who have never been stopped for jaywalking because they know they must not call attention to themselves. If you want to see a really good movie, I recommend Bridge of Spies. It's about the Rudolph Abel spy case. Francis Gary Powers, the U-2 pilot who gets shot down and gets swapped for him. Tom Hanks is in the movie. Phenomenal movie. And if you look at the way they portray Rudolph Abel, he was a Russian spy. He did not look like James Bond. He was not driving an Aston Martin. Okay? I promise you. These are people that you walk by them on the street, you don't give them a second look. They don't even wear cologne because you might remember the aroma of the guy's cologne. They are taught spycraft. What does that mean? Low profile. You don't wear a $5,000 Armani suit. You wear $39 Levi jeans and sweats and sneakers, etc., etc. That's what an effective spy, terrorist, bad guy looks like and dresses like. Okay? So when I hear this nonsense, and now the president says, we're going to put these people, the farmers, in charge, the other problem that you have, and many farmers are hardworking, conscientious, but they're desperate. They're falling on hard times.
Right.
Imagine if you said to a farmer, I have a cash crop for you. It's a pay stub. And if you give Jose or John, and by the way, Mahmoud Abu Alima was Egyptian farm worker, not really, claimed to be.
Yeah.
If you give Ahmed, Jose, Isaac, pick a name, every country, every nationality, same business. This isn't about race.
Right.
You give them a couple of pay stubs, and we'll give you $10,000. The guy looks at you and he says, are you crazy? We had a case like that where this farm had so many workers that if they all showed up at the same time, there would have been no room for the crops. The farm would have looked like a New York City subway car during the rush hour. He had like 1,000 employees, and he had a tiny farm. 1,000 employees. None of them worked for him. None of them. And while he was out on bail, he fled the country, which is because he himself was an alien. So when you say to a farmer, you can vouch for the alien, and he says to his friends, 10 grand, I'll give you the paperwork you need. And now he takes care of 1,000 people. This guy just hit the jackpot. He just became a millionaire. And you don't pay taxes on this money because it's all cash and carry.
Right.
So ask yourself, does this sort of idea make any sense to anybody? No. No. Now, I'm glad that President Trump wants to hire more ICE agents than Border Patrol agents. Finally.
Yeah.
Finally. And you know, by the way, and I'll go back to what I said when I was doing the hearings. It was remarkable because it was the Republicans, for the most part, who would call me up. And the chief counsel would say to me, you're not going to believe what he did now. And I always knew who the he was. It was George W. Bush. And these were the Republicans. They were enraged because when he created DHS, he really created the Department of Homeland Surrender.
That's right.
And as bad as he was, then you had Obama come in. And Mayorkas, by the way, was the head of Citizenship and Immigration Services. No one pays attention to that agency. They are America's locksmith. I don't know if this happened anywhere where you are, but in New York and up in Westchester and these other high rent districts, if you will, we had burglars breaking into expensive cars. Why in the world would a burglar break into a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes or a Jaguar or a Porsche? Why would a burglar break into a car? I'll tell you why. Because once they get into the car, they get the little clicker, the garage door opener.
Yep.
And then they would break into the glove box, and now they've got the guy's address because he has an envelope from his insurance company. Oh, he's at 123 Main Street. They rush over to 123 Main Street. They do surveillance. The lights aren't on. There's nobody home. They open the garage door and they're in the house. And then they clean the house out and they're gone within 30 minutes. They never broke a window. They didn't have to force their way in. The garage door opener was literally their key to success. When you hear this nonsense, if you're going to build a wall, the alien comes with a taller ladder. No, he comes with a green card. And Mayorkas, when he ran Citizenship and Immigration Services, was approving petitions for Iranians that were believed to be involved with terrorism.
Hmm.
ABC News did a multi-part story on this. Chuck Grassley, and I testified for Chuck at my last hearing, that was back in 2013. Chuck Grassley warned about this. That Mayorkas was doing favors for politicians, approving visas for treaty investors, and for Iranians involved with what might have been terrorism. And the FBI said, you can't provide these people with visas. He said, the hell I can't. And he did. And when one of the people who worked for him on the West Coast said, I can't approve these petitions, this individual was one of the bosses who ran one of the offices. He said, you will approve it or I will demote you and you'll be working out of your living room. And she said, you can't do that because there's no statutory authority to approve the petition.
Hmm.
He said, I'm giving you the authority and I'm giving you the orders and you'll do it or else.
Or else. Mm.
And so then what happens? He becomes the head of Homeland Security.
Not special.
And I wrote about it when Biden said this was the guy that was going to run the agency. And I said, boy, DHS will really now be the Department of Homeland Surrender.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I wasn't wrong. So you have both sides of the aisle looking for, and Trump says, why do they want these people? So again, Mr. President, if you're watching, for the rest of you, hold on to your seatbelts here. This is a delivery system. It's not just the cheap labor.
That's right.
When those caravans were marching up from Latin America, these were clients for immigration law firms, and you have immigration lawyers on both sides of the aisle. Immigration law used to be a boutique practice. In New York, if you had two or three law firms that specialized in immigration, it was a lot, but that was back in the 70s when I was an adjudicator. Today, it's one of the biggest areas of law. Why chase an ambulance when you can chase a smuggler? Okay.
Mhm.
Number two, an unlimited number of clients for these NGOs, non-government organizations. They call them nonprofits, but they get hundreds of millions of dollars in government contracts.
That's right.
What Donald Trump should be talking about is the money being wired out of the United States by the alien workers. He
Mhm.
wants to tax the remittances. Tom Tancredo, who had been the chairman of the House Immigration Reform Caucus, and I testified for Tom right after 9/11, wanted to tax the remittances. Charlie Fote, who was the president of First Data Corp back then, which was the parent to Western Union, threatened to move Western Union headquarters from Atlanta to Colorado, Tancredo's home state, to primary him out of Congress because they didn't want to have people paying tax on their remittances that were leaving the country. If you want to see a major source of money loss, every dollar that leaves the economy is really like $3 or $4 because that money does not move through the economy. The whole idea to the economic stimulus package was that if we put money in the hands of American consumers, they'll spend the money. So the guy that sells you shoes buys a refrigerator. The guy that sells him the refrigerator goes to Disney World, and the money goes round and round. When
Mhm.
they wire money out of the country, it's lost to the economy. For Mexico, the remittances have traditionally been the second biggest source of revenue for their entire country's economy. Same thing with Ecuador, same thing with El Salvador, other countries. It's a big deal. And the money moving out of the country sometimes gets laundered through banking, Wall Street, real estate, just like the drug money. And this is a huge hit on the US economy. So if you look at everything that's happening Everybody, and I mean everybody, is feeding at the trough. You have foreign students in the United States. And here's another one, by the way, Dianne Feinstein. This was in February 98, 2 days short of the fifth anniversary of the bombing of the Trade Center in 93. Those of you may have forgotten it, but there was a bombing in 93. That's who we're talking about. We talk about Mahmoud Abu Alima,
Right.
okay, that attack.
Mhm.
So they had a hearing about Iranian terrorists operating in the United States. And Feinstein had three suggestions. And I worked with Diane's people, by the way. I was always on the phone with her chief counsel and chief of staff. Maybe we should reconsider the visa waiver program. I was absolutely dead set against it. It removed an important layer of security from the United States.
Mhm.
And it also made it easier for terrorists to get on airplanes.
Right.
Think back to Richard Reed, the British bomber
Right.
who had bombs in his shoes. He didn't need a visa to get on the airplane because he was a Brit. So she worried about the visa waiver program. She said maybe we shouldn't be giving visas to aliens that come from countries that sponsor terrorism. And we certainly shouldn't be giving such aliens training in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, because she gave specific examples of terrorists who'd been educated either in the United States
Mhm.
or Europe and then used the training to make weapons of mass destruction. So now you have America's foremost schools, besides being the center for anti Semitism and bigotry and hatred, they are also providing education to people who want to blow up the United States. And they say to the president, we're not going to tell you where our foreign students are. Well, wait a minute. In order for a student to get a visa to be a student, the school has to issue a form called the I-20 form.
Mhm.
And the school has entered into a contractual arrangement with immigration authorities that they will let immigration know if that student fails to attend school. Go back again to the guy that rented the truck who failed to attend school but remained in the United States illegally. So they're supposed to say to immigration, Charlie Smith is no longer attending school. Charlie Smith dropped out. The last time he paid tuition was 2 years ago. He needs to leave. They're supposed to tell us that because if you have a student visa but you're not attending school, you are in violation of your visa and subject to removal. So, how in the world do we have the courts arguing with the administration when they say we need to know these foreign students? Columbia University, was it 27% of their students are foreign students,
Right.
and you don't want to tell us if they're attending classes or what they're studying?
Yeah. Mhm.
We worked a major drug ring, and the guy had come to the United States on a student visa to go to Brooklyn College, and he subsequently dropped out of Brooklyn College and lied when we arrested him. He wound up doing 7 or 8 years in jail for laundering millions of dollars in drug money for the Colombian cartels here in the United States. So one of the first things that I looked at is he's still in school. And in those days, the school immediately said, no, the last time he attended school was 2.5 years ago. He dropped out. He never had a full curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. We're supposed to get that information. So explain how it's possible that the schools can thumb their nose or wave a finger at the President of the United States, even though they entered into a contractual arrangement with that Form I-20 that says we will notify you if the student fails to attend. We used to have agents go to the schools, but there weren't that many. The last time I checked, and this was a few years ago, there were over 8,000 schools authorized to issue I-20s. Think about that. Why? How many people are going to come here from the third world and spend $20,000 learning woodworking or some other craft in a trade school? Think about that. Very often, these schools exist only on paper, and they are in existence simply to provide documents to enable aliens to enter the United States under the appearance of
Mhm.
legal entry. It's not just illegal immigration. You say that I talk about both sides. Well, here's an example where supposedly they're legal, but they're not because they lied when they got the visa. They lied when they entered at the airport, right? So if you lie to the inspector, if you lie to get a visa, you're excludable, you're deportable. And the laws have nothing to do with race or religion or ethnicity. And I want everybody, here's your homework assignment, go to Title 8, United States Code, Section 1182, Title 8, 1182, it lists the categories of aliens who are to be kept out of the country. Aliens who were previously deported, aliens who have dangerous diseases, aliens who are severely mentally ill, aliens who are criminals and terrorists and spies and human rights violators, war criminals, fugitives from justice, aliens who, if they worked, would take the jobs of Americans and drive down wages, or aliens who would become a public charge requiring that we support them. It's very common sense. It's about protecting public health, public safety, national security, and jobs and wages for Americans. And the Republicans, late to the game, but better late than never, and the Democrats, they're telling people that if you oppose the enforcement of those laws that are designed to protect American lives, you're a hero. You want to be a hero? Interfere with ICE. Physically attack ICE agents because they're the enemy. Yes, they're arresting terrorists, they're arresting drug dealers, and they're arresting child molesters. But in our twisted view of the universe, these people are really the victims.
That's right.
And now we've got a guy who wants to be the mayor.
Yeah, let's talk about. We have about 5 minutes left in our time.
Okay.
So give us.
I've been trying to cover as much territory as I
resident in New York
can. I hope this is helpful.
Oh, it's incredibly helpful. We got 5 minutes on the.
All right.
So, Mike, you're a resident in New York City. Give us in 5 minutes your take on this guy because this is well, I'll let you.
Well, look, and I want to be very clear. America should be the home to anybody who comes to America peacefully, wants to share the American dream, better their lot in life, and become part of this incredible tapestry that we call America.
Right.
Part of what I love about New York is our rich diversity. I've been all over the country, from Hawaii to Seattle there's no place like New York.
That's right.
Whatever food, whatever music, we have it, and it's authentic and it's available 24/7. We're better to live. But if you're going to come to America to further acts of violence, then there's a problem. And, some of the doctors who cared for me, and if you remember, I'm very, very blessed. I had some incredible doctors save my life. I had stage 3 colon cancer, plus other things going on. I was a 15-ring circus, and they must have had 20 doctors working on me, and at least half of them are devout Muslims. And if I was their brother, they could not have treated me with more compassion or more talent or more dedication. They worked tirelessly through the night to find a solution to my problem. I could get emotional. My son's friends, one of my sons has a number of friends. They were all engineers. They went to engineering school together, and they're Muslims. And I could care less, and they could care less that we're Jewish. If we looked at what makes us similar, my goodness, we could solve half the world's problems. I hope now that the situation with Iran is where it is, I hope that the Abraham Accords can spread through the Middle East. And so that finally we could bring an end to the senseless violence because nobody wins a war.
No one wins.
We were told we won World War II. Well, we defeated the Nazis, but nobody wins when 60 million people lose their lives. Okay. Right. So violence is wrong. This Strategic Air Command used to say that peace was their professions and they flew nuclear bombers, right? Because the idea was, intimidate the enemy so that they know that you have to be a damn fool to take us on, right? In fact, in law enforcement and military, there's an expression: if you're out there on a mission and you find you're in a fair fight, somebody screwed up the planning. You don't want a fair fight. You want to overwhelm the opposition so that you have compliance and no shots fired, okay?
So in our last couple minutes.
So the point is, you have a guy who comes here and will not renounce global intifada. And that word global is what freaks me out on top of it. Yeah. Because it's like, let's spread intifada, which is the war against the Jews from the Middle East, to every country. And he himself and his family are immigrants. It's not a problem that he's an immigrant, but if you think that you're here to promote global intifada, spread the hatred and the violence and the bigotry to the United States, I have a problem with you. Yeah. And it's not because I'm Jewish and we're talking about Jews. I don't care if we're talking about blacks or greens or purples or polka dots.
Right.
And remember, it was so many Jewish people who worked to end the civil rights insanity of segregation and so forth in Mississippi in the 60s. You had kids of every religion who fell victim to violence because they took on the bigotry of racism. We should be standing together as one, as Americans, denouncing any effort to treat anybody differently. And this guy comes in and says, we're going to make the whites pay more, and we're going to continue global intifada. And well, it's not the words I use, but I'm not going to censor anybody. Seriously?
And he's talking
So
about seizing the means of production of businesses. I mean, come on.
I mean, goodness gracious, the American people have got to wake up and we've got to have the courage to stand up and say, we won't have any part of this insanity. It's insane to me to look at Columbia University and see the riots, see these Jewish kids who are afraid to go to class.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to safe spaces? Whatever happened to inclusion? I guess safe spaces and inclusion doesn't involve Jews. If you're a Jew, not so much. This has to end. The American people need to stand up. But here's the question: where are the members of the Democrat Party? Some of whom are Jewish, some of whom I know, as my family did, lost family members in the Holocaust. I was named for my mother's mother. She couldn't get out of Poland, was killed by the Nazi bastards. Okay.
Mhm.
That's who I was named for, my mother's mother, my grandmother, who I never met because she died in the Holocaust.
Mhm.
So you would think that our leaders would stand up and say, we are leaders and we won't allow this to happen to our country or to our party. You know, Schumer is not a leader. He plays pretending at being a leader. But I'm going to give Chucky a piece of advice. Hey, Chuck, and Nadler, you as well. Running in front of the train, trying to keep from being run over, is not the same thing as leading the train. Running from the train is an act of extreme cowardice. Leaders don't show cowardice. You want to see a leader, and I don't always agree with him. Look at Donald Trump. Read about General Patton. Look at these other people who stood up and staked out a position and said, you may not like what I stand for, but this is who I am, and you're going to have to go through me to do harm to other human beings.
And there's
Where-
one other leader you didn't mention, and that's you, Mike Cutler. I'd like to thank you, Mike. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. You are a leader as it relates to freedom and liberty for, underline the word, every person in our country and every person around the world. I'd like to thank you, Mike, for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. MichaelCutler.net. I'd like to thank you folks for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.